Hi everybody, this will be part 25 in the character rigging tutorial series. In this video we're going to talk about how to set up controls for the torso, from the pelvis to the spine to the neck and head. And then we will come back in next video or next couple of videos and do the arms. So the last video we talked about setting up the controls for the legs. We talked about inverse kinematics as well as constraints. And some of the constraints and curve setup will transfer over to the torso and spine. But we won't be doing a IK system for the spine. You could, but we're not going to do that for this one. We're going to do forward kinematics for the pelvis and spine. We'll also talk about a couple other smaller things that we need to do, some adjustments, but overall this process should be pretty straightforward as well. So we're going to do a curve, and I'm going to move that up and scale that pretty large. And this is going to be just outside of the pelvis area. So there's my curve. I'm going to hold down the V key and snap that to the center of the pelvis. So I know that's centered there. For forward kinematic controls, you want to make sure that this curve's pivot is in the center of the joint. If it's slightly off, it's not going to rotate the joint properly. So let's make sure it's in the center, and we're going to title this one Control Pelvis. So I already have an object called JPelvis, so I don't want to rename it JPelvis or just pelvis. So I say C_pelvis for control. All right, we can customize this shape if we want to, but I think it's pretty good as a full circle, just a default circle there for the pelvis. So if you remember correctly, some things we need to do before we set up any of the constraints with a control to a joint or IK. After we name it, position it where we want to, we're going to go to Edit, Delete by Type History, removes any history it has. And then go to Modify Freeze Transformations. That resorts the translate and rotate back to 0 and scale back to 1. Okay. All right, so for the pelvis, we are ready to set up the constraint. So I'm going to select my pelvis control, and then I'm in the outliner, hold down the control key, and click on the joint pelvis. Okay. I'm going to do the same parent constraint that I did for the leg. So for the constraint here, you select the control first, then the pelvis joint. I'm going to go to the box beside parent. We want to make sure maintain offset is turned on, and then we're going to choose add. Okay. On the joint, the translate and rotate should now have the blue box saying that these attributes are being driven by something else, which what that really means for us is that you shouldn't be animating the joints anymore at this point. So on the pelvis control, if I select the pelvis control, the blue attributes or blue boxes should not be on the control, should be on the joint. If I move my pelvis control, that should move my pelvis joint. All right, so our pelvis control is ready to go. We can also test out the rotate, and this should rotate the upper body, rotating all three angles. The IKs in the lower leg should stay put until I tell it not to, right? Until it locks up those joints. So pelvis control is done. It's ready to go. All right, the next couple of joints, we do need to change the hierarchy and change the rotate so that they can work properly. So that's going to be important as we create our spine and into our neck joints as well. So that way we are able to still move the body in succession according to the pelvis joint as well. So the pelvis is the root of everything. So when I move, rotate the pelvis, that should move and rotate the entire upper body. The feet should stay still for planting purposes. But so then when I start to create controls for the next spine joint up, I need to make sure that it's parented to the control pelvis down there. So we're going to create another curve control. Move it up, scale it out, and then I'm going to hold down the V key with the move tool. Make sure that snaps to that spine 1 joint. So let's go ahead and rename that one, Control Spine 1. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. Then I'm going to get my move tool and hold down the V key and snap that up to Control Spine 2. Okay. I'm going to duplicate that, get my move tool, snap that up here to the center of my spine 3. Okay. Let's hit Control D again, and I'm going to get my move tool, and we'll snap that to the base neck joint. Okay, this one doesn't need to be that big, so we will rotate that one down. We'll duplicate again and move that up to the next neck joint. Let's go that down a little bit more. Okay. Now I also have one right underneath here as well, so we might as well create a control for that as well. Since I create the joint, make sure we snap that to the center of the geometry, or the joint. I can actually turn my geometry off temporarily, so I make sure all those controls are to the joints. All right, so let's go rename. This is my C neck 1, C neck 2, C neck 3. Okay. Our head doesn't really rotate from any of these points up here, but the joints are set up there for skinning and for exaggeration purposes for the end one. So we're not going to create controls for those areas. All right, so a couple things is from a side view. Turn off my grid there. My joint is rotated back here for this spine joint 1. So what I need to do is take that curve control and tilt that back so that the control is also tilted following the same direction of the joint. So now I'm going to work my way up. Now spine control 2, I'm going to rotate that back so that follows the joint rotation. Let's select control 3, and we need to rotate that back a little bit. There you go. So that follows the next joint up. Here's my neck control. I'm going to rotate that forward so that follows the next joint rotation. This is my neck 2. I need to rotate that forward really a lot this time to follow the next joint up. So what I'm doing here is following to this next joint. It needs to align to the next joint down. This is my neck 3, so I'm going to rotate that one forward in the x-axis so that way that follows that joint. All right. So for spine joints, these are going to be forward kinematic controls. They need to rotate in the direction the same exact angle as the joint that it's going to affect. So this control is going to rotate and affect this joint, this one right here. So they need to have the same exact rotate angle. All right. So the issue comes with the next step. So usually we would come in here with all of these controls, and we can still do the first step, is select those controls and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. But what I can't do is select this control and go to Modify Freeze Transformations, because I need to keep that rotate angle. If I do Modify Freeze Transformations, that rotate will resort back to vertical and horizontal axes. So let's take a look at it from this angle. If I do Modify Freeze Transformations now, it popped that angle back to straight value, which is not what I want. So I'm going to undo that Modify Freeze Transformations. I need to be able to keep that rotate angle, but what I don't want to have are these attribute values that are anything other than 0 for transient rotate and anything more or less than 1 for scale. So we need to create or use a script coding that will give us the opportunity to zero out the translate, do that modify freeze transformation, but keep our rotate angle. So what I'm using is called an offset controller script, and this is the script editor. I'll show you where this is. The script editor is the bottom right button in the UI. So if I click that, this will open up the script editor. The script editor is really helpful for a rigging standpoint. The top part of the script editor shows you every command that I've done. So these are all the commands that I've done here: select, rotate, duplicate. So that shows you in coding all of the commands that I've done visually. Maya accepts two different types of scripting language. One of them is MEL, M-E-L, and that's Maya's scripting language, and the other one is Python. So you can create rigging or scripts in MEL or Python to be able to drive or automate certain functions or actions within Maya. What we're doing here is we're using this offset controller script to do the modify freeze transformations for me. It creates a dummy group and zeroes out the translates and rotates, and still keeps that rotate angle for me, which is going to be really important when I start to animate these forward kinematic controls. This offset controller script is actually from Tina O'Haley's Rig It Right book. So if you'd like to access this script, I'm not going to give it away because I didn't create it, but you can go look up Tina O'Haley's Rig It Right book and download this script and use this. You can also take a look and see how it does, or create your own that does a very similar way. So this is the offset controller script. This is actually using a global proc, which is an easier way to recall this in Maya. I'm actually just going to delete the top 5 lines so the global proc is not there. There we go. So my first line is the curly bracket. So what this script is going to do is going to create a dummy group, a blank group. It's going to freeze the transformations on the curve, but keep the rotates of the curve. Okay, so the transforms are going to move to the dummy group. The curve, as far as these individual attributes over here, those transform attribute values are going to move over to the dummy group, and the curve is going to have 0 dot transforms, but still keep this rotate angle that we want. So before we do the constraints to be able to rotate the joint with the curve control, we need to do this offset controller script. All right, so move this down a little bit. And this process works by selecting the curve. We need to go ahead and have the rotate angle set properly. Select the curve. You can shift or hold down control and click on the joint that I want this curve to eventually affect. And then I'm going to have my offset controller script open with those two things selected, curve and then the joint, excuse me. In the bottom section of my script editor, I'm going to hit Control A to select everything. Oh, I think I might need to reload this. Let's see. Let's close it. Delete tab. Yeah, so it's not giving me the execute. So let me close that. Delete current tab, and now I'll open up the script. So this is good because in case you've never used the script editor, this is how we would open up a script. So if I go to File, Open, if you download that offset controller, put it in the desktop. I don't know where I put it. Offset controller. So we go File, Open Script in the script editor, and then locate the offset controller script. Now I'm going to go back. Yep, I already deleted the top sections. There you go. So with the curve selected first, and then the joint, the spine joint, I'm going to, in the curve or the script editor, hit Control A to select all of the lines. And then there's an execute button, looks like a play button. When I execute this, minimize this some. If I look at the curve control now, my transforms are frozen. If I get my rotate tool, my rotate angle is still there. But what it did was it created this group, or GRP, down here. So the group has the transforms, and my control spine is underneath that. So that will still allow me to rotate how I want to and reset my curve control how I need to. So now that the offset controller script has been run, the curve is now ready. We've deleted the history, we freeze the transforms through the offset controller script. We only do this for forward kinematic controls. So select the curve, and then I'm going to shift select the joint that I want it to rotate. And then I'm going to go to constrain, and we're going to use a different one this time. We're going to use the orient constraint. So I'm going to go to the box beside orient constraint and make sure maintain offset is turned on. And then we will do add. Okay. So when I rotate this joint or this control now, curve spine 1, it should rotate that joint. Okay, so that's how we want that to set up. All right, so let's repeat process for the next control up. This is the control spine 2. First thing I need to do is shift select the joint, and we need to run the offset controller script. Make sure it's all the lines of codes are selected down here with Control A, then hit execute. That creates my second group. Make sure my rotates are saved there. And then I'm going to select the curve, shift select the joint again, constrain, orient. I know maintain offset's turned on because it remembers that setting. Okay, there you go. So now if I rotate that second control joint or control spine, that should rotate the spine from that angle. So we're going to work our way up. So what we might want to do is come in here and kind of scale in some of these joints before we do the offset controller. The spine ones are okay, but let's move it out a little bit so I can still see it from that angle. That one's okay there. Let's look at our neck. Yeah, our neck is okay there. Top neck one. What I might want to do with this top neck one is go into control vertex and move this one down, like move these vertices or points down so it's not overlapping the jaw. We're going to create a jaw control later as well. Maybe the back ones can go up a little. There you go. So that way that one is refined but not kind of overlapping the geometry as much. Okay. All right, so those look like they're scaled pretty good here. Okay, so spine 3 control. Turn our joints back on. And we're going to shift select that joint. We're going to first run the offset controller script. We're going to reshift select that joint and go to constrain orient. So this is all repetition now. We're going to move up to our first neck joint. Shift select that base neck, first neck control. Shift select the first neck joint. Run the offset controller script. Reshift select that joint. Go to constrain orient. Okay. We can test these out individually as well. Good, pretty good. Let's work our way up. So we have neck 2. That one goes to this joint. We'll run our offset controller script. Reshift select the joint, constrain orient. Then we're going to do our last neck joint. Shift select the neck control to neck joint. Run the offset controller script. Reshift select the joint, constrain orient. Okay. Good. So now each one of those should work properly. Okay, those all rotate according to the controls and the joints that we have set up. One final thing with this video is that we've created groups, and there's going to be one issue. So if I go back to my pelvis and move my pelvis, those controls don't actually move with it. If I go to my next spine joint and rotate that, whoa, now there's some weird stuff going on here. And the reason is because my controls aren't parented up properly back to the pelvis. So what I'm going to do is open up the hierarchy for each one of these groups that were created with that offset controller script. And this has to be parented in this order for everything to work. So basically I'm going to go down to my neck 3 group, hold down the control key on the keyboard, and click on my C_neck, my neck control. So basically we're going to parent a group to a control. So I'm going to take this group for my neck 3 control, hold down the control key and select the curve for the neck control and do P for parent. So what that means is the group gets parented underneath the curve. We don't want to do parent the group underneath the group because we're bypassing the curve. So we're going to work our way up. We're going to go group for neck 2 to curve of neck 1. P for parent. So it should be indented in each time. Neck 1 group to spine 3 curve. P for parent. I'm holding down shift when I hit the plus symbol, and that opens up the entire hierarchy. So group for spine 3 to curve for spine 2. P for parent. Okay, indent it in each time. Curve for spine 2, group for spine 2 to curve for spine 1. P for parent. Okay. The last one is the group for spine 1 to the pelvis curve. So P for parent. Okay, let's hit our shift key on the plus symbol. So it should be indented in each time. So now this is how the spine and the torso controls should be set up. So now if I move my pelvis control, the curves controls for the spine and neck work. If I rotate this, that should rotate all of those curve controls above that. But if I go to the next curve above that and select that curve control, all of the curves above that will also rotate. And the body will rotate how we want to. There's our neck, neck 2, and then neck 3. Okay. So there's how our spine and pelvis and neck controls can all be set up. So that's a simple way to set up forward kinematics for the torso. All right, next couple of videos we'll come back and do the forward kinematics for the arms, and then we'll come back and do basic eye and jaw controls as well.